Maya Chen had always been the kind of person who could disappear in a room full of people. At 22, she had mastered the art of being invisible. While other college graduates fought tooth and nail for prestigious internships, Maya had somehow landed a position at the White House Visitor Center almost by accident. Her professor had recommended her for the program, and before she knew it, she was walking through the most famous building in America every morning, feeling completely out of place. The White House was everything Maya wasn't: bold, confident, important. Every day she watched as other interns strutted through the halls like they belonged there, chatting easily with senior staff members and volunteers. They seemed to have this natural ability to command attention, to make themselves heard in meetings, to network effortlessly during lunch breaks. Maya, on the other hand, preferred to eat her sandwich alone in the break room while reading a book. Her supervisors had quickly figured out where to place her, while the outgoing interns got assigned to give tours or work directly with VIP visitors. Maya found herself behind the scenes. She organized files, updated databases, managed schedules, and handled the kind of paperwork that kept the visitor center running smoothly. It was perfect for her personality, really. She could do good work without having to talk to strangers or be the center of attention. The other staff members were nice enough, but Maya could tell they barely registered her presence. She was the quiet girl who always showed up on time, did her work without complaining, and never caused any drama. In staff meetings, she sat in the back corner and nodded along when appropriate. When her supervisor asked for volunteers to help with special events, Maya kept her eyes down and let others raise their hands. She had convinced herself that this was just how she was built, and there was nothing wrong with being a background person in a world full of stars. But Maya had a secret that none of her colleagues knew about. Something that made her different, special even though she would never think of herself that way. She could communicate in American Sign Language as fluently as she spoke English. This wasn't something she had learned in college or picked up as a hobby. It was a part of her life, woven into her family story in a way that had shaped who she was. When Maya was 8 years old, her baby brother David was born. The whole family was excited, but as David grew, they began to notice something was different. He wasn't responding to sounds the way other babies did. After months of doctor visits and tests, they learned that David was deaf. Maya still remembered the day her parents sat her down to explain what this meant for their family. Instead of seeing it as a challenge, Maya's parents embraced it as an opportunity to learn something new together. The whole family started taking sign language classes. Maya was the fastest learner, her young mind soaking up the visual language like a sponge, while her parents struggled with the grammar and her older sister complained about having to practice. Maya found something beautiful in the way thoughts could be expressed through hand movements and facial expressions. David became her closest friend growing up. While other kids sometimes stared or didn't know how to include him in games, Maya was always there as his translator and advocate. She helped him navigate school events, birthday parties, and family gatherings. Through David, she met other deaf children and adults, and her signing skills became more natural and nuanced. She learned not just the technical aspects of the language, but the cultural elements that made the deaf community so special. Now, 14 years later, Maya's signing was flawless. She could interpret rapid conversations, understand regional variations in signs, and even catch the subtle jokes and wordplay that made the deaf community laugh. But here at the White House, surrounded by hearing colleagues who communicated primarily through confident speeches and important phone calls, this skill felt irrelevant. She had never mentioned it on her application or in her interview. It just didn't seem important for someone whose job involved organizing files and updating computer systems. Maya's typical day started at 8 in the morning when she arrived at the visitor center. She would grab her security badge, walk through the familiar hallways, and settle into her small desk in the administrative office. The morning hours were usually quiet, giving her time to catch up on paperwork and prepare for the busy afternoon rush when tour groups would flood through the building. She had developed a comfortable routine over her 3 months as an intern. Coffee from the break room at 9:30, lunch at her desk while reading, a brief walk around the building at 3 o'clock to stretch her legs and get some fresh air. By 5:30, she was usually heading home to her small apartment, feeling satisfied with another day of useful but unremarkable work. The other interns had tried to include her at first. They invited her to happy hours and weekend gatherings, but Maya always found polite excuses to decline. It wasn't that she didn't like them, she just felt awkward in social situations. She worried about saying the wrong thing, or not being interesting enough to contribute to conversations about politics, current events, or career ambitions. Maya's supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, was a kind woman in her 50s who seemed to understand Maya's personality. She gave her clear instructions, praised her attention to detail, and never pushed her to take on more visible roles. Sometimes Maya wondered if Mrs. Patterson saw potential in her that she didn't see in herself, but she was too afraid to ask. On this particular Tuesday morning in late October, Maya arrived at work feeling especially invisible. The previous day, she had watched from her desk as another intern, someone who had started the same week as her, gave an impromptu presentation to a group of visiting students. The intern had been confident, engaging, and articulate. Maya had felt a familiar pang of envy mixed with resignation. Some people were just born to shine, and others were meant to support them from the shadows. As Maya organized her desk and prepared for another quiet day of administrative work, she had no idea that everything was about to change. She couldn't have predicted that her carefully maintained invisibility was about to crumble, or that the very skill she had kept hidden would soon put her at the center of attention in a way that would terrify and transform her. The morning passed uneventfully. Maya updated visitor databases, filed security reports, and helped prepare materials for the afternoon tour groups. As lunchtime approached, Mrs. Patterson asked if she would be willing to cover the information desk for a few hours while the regular staff took their breaks. Maya's stomach immediately tightened with anxiety, but she nodded and agreed. After all, how difficult could it be to answer basic questions and hand out brochures? Little did Maya know that this simple assignment would lead to the most important moment of her young life. Maya's hands were already sweating as she walked toward the information desk. The large circular counter sat right in the main entrance area, where hundreds of visitors passed through every day. Behind it were pamphlets, maps, and a computer system that she had only used a few times during training. Mrs. Patterson had made it sound simple enough. Answer basic questions, hand out materials, and direct people to the right places. But for someone who preferred to work behind the scenes, being stationed at the center of all the activity felt like being thrown into a spotlight. The lunch rush was just beginning. Tour groups were gathering, families were taking photos, and the usual buzz of excitement filled the air. Maya tried to calm her nerves by organizing the brochures for the third time and checking that the computer was working properly. A few visitors approached with simple questions about restroom locations and tour schedules, and Maya managed to help them without too much trouble. Maybe this wouldn't be as bad as she had imagined. Around 1:30, the afternoon crowd really started to pick up. Maya watched as confident staff members moved through the space, effortlessly managing groups and answering complex questions about American history and government. She envied their ease with people, their ability to make visitors feel welcomed and informed. When someone asked her a question she didn't know the answer to, her face would turn red and she would stammer while looking up information on the computer. It was during this busy period that Maya first noticed the woman standing near the entrance. She was probably in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and wearing a navy blue dress that looked like she had chosen it carefully for this special visit. There was something about her posture that caught Maya's attention. The woman kept looking around, seeming to search for something or someone, but there was also a hesitancy in her movements that Maya recognized. Maya watched as the woman approached one of the volunteer guides, a friendly college student who was known for his enthusiasm and helpfulness. The woman began moving her hands in what Maya immediately recognized as sign language. Her gestures were clear and purposeful, asking what appeared to be questions about tours and accessibility. But the volunteer just stared at her with a confused expression, clearly having no idea what she was trying to communicate. Maya felt her heart sink as she watched the interaction unfold. The volunteer was trying to be helpful, speaking louder as if that would somehow make a difference and gesturing vaguely toward different areas of the building. The woman's face showed a mixture of patience and growing frustration. She tried pointing to her ears and shaking her head to indicate that she was deaf. But the volunteer still didn't understand what she needed. From her position behind the information desk, Maya could see the woman's signs perfectly. She was asking about accessible tours, whether there were any services for deaf visitors, and how long the wait time might be for a guided tour. These were all reasonable questions that any staff member should have been able to answer. But the communication barrier was making it impossible. The volunteer finally walked away to get help, leaving the woman standing alone. Maya watched as another staff member approached, but the same scene repeated itself. Hand gestures, confused expressions, and eventually another person walking away to find someone who might be able to help. Maya knew that feeling of being left standing while people went to find solutions that never seemed to come. Meanwhile, Maya's own desk was getting busy. Visitors were lining up with questions, and she was supposed to be focused on helping them. But she kept glancing over at the woman, who was now standing by herself near a wall, looking increasingly discouraged. Maya could see other visitors staring at her, some with curiosity, others with the kind of uncomfortable expressions people get when they don't understand a situation. Maya's chest felt tight as she watched this unfold. She knew exactly what the woman was going through. She had seen her brother David experience the same frustration countless times over the years, the feeling of being invisible not because you chose to be, but because the world around you wasn't equipped to see you or communicate with you. Maya had spent years being David's voice in situations like this, helping him navigate a world that often forgot that deaf people existed. But this was different. This wasn't her little brother at a school event or a family gathering. This was the White House, and Maya was just an intern who was supposed to be answering basic questions about tour times and restroom locations. Getting involved would mean stepping out of her comfort zone in a major way. It would mean drawing attention to herself, using a skill that none of her colleagues knew she had, and potentially making mistakes in front of all these important people. Maya tried to focus on the visitors at her desk, but her eyes kept drifting back to the woman. She had been standing alone for almost 15 minutes now, and Maya could see her confidence deflating. The woman kept checking her watch and looking toward the exit, clearly debating whether to give up on her visit entirely. That's when something clicked inside Maya. She thought about David, about all the times she had seen him light up when someone took the time to communicate with him properly. She thought about the deaf community she had gotten to know over the years, and how often they dealt with situations where their needs were simply overlooked. She thought about her parents, who had taught her that having a skill meant nothing if you weren't willing to use it to help others. Maya looked around to see if Mrs. Patterson was nearby, but she was in a meeting. The other staff members were all busy with their own tasks. The woman was now pulling out her phone, probably to call someone to pick her up, ready to leave without getting the tour she had clearly planned for and looked forward to. Maya took a deep breath and made a decision that surprised even her. She put up a small sign at her desk indicating that she would be back in a few minutes, and walked out from behind the information counter. Her legs felt shaky and her heart was pounding, but she kept moving toward the woman. As Maya got closer, she could see the disappointment more clearly on the woman's face. This wasn't just someone who had come for a casual visit. This was someone who had planned this trip, who had dressed up for the occasion, who had probably been looking forward to this experience for a long time. Maya knew that feeling too. She remembered how excited David would get before special events, and how crushed he would be when communication barriers prevented him from fully participating. Maya stopped a few feet away from the woman and took another deep breath. This was it, the moment where she would either help someone who really needed it, or embarrass herself in front of everyone. She raised her hands and signed a simple greeting. "Hello, can I help you?" The transformation on the woman's face was instant and incredible. Her eyes widened with surprise and relief, and a smile spread across her features like sunrise. She immediately began signing back, her movements animated with excitement and gratitude. "Yes, please. I've been trying to get information about tours for deaf visitors, but no one here knows sign language." I was about to leave. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in months, she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The woman's name was Linda Torres, and as she began to tell Maya her story through sign language, Maya felt her own nervousness melting away. Linda had traveled all the way from Arizona for this visit. She had been planning this trip for over 2 years, saving up money and coordinating time off from her job at a local library. This wasn't just a casual tourist visit. For Linda, seeing the White House had been a dream since she was a little girl. Linda explained that she had called ahead multiple times, trying to arrange for an interpreter or ask about accessibility services. Each time she had been transferred to different departments, put on hold for long periods, or told that someone would call her back who never did. Eventually, she decided to just come anyway, hoping that once she arrived, someone would be able to help her. She had been disappointed so many times before, but she hadn't wanted to give up on this particular dream. As Linda shared her story, Maya felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about answering a quick question or providing basic information. This was about making sure that someone who had worked so hard to get here would have the experience she deserved. Maya realized that she was probably the only person in the entire building who could communicate with Linda properly, and that made her responsible for making this visit special. Maya glanced back at the information desk where a small line had formed, and then looked at Linda's hopeful face. There really wasn't a choice to make. She signed to Linda to wait just one moment, then hurried back to her desk to grab a colleague who could cover for her. She told him there was a visitor who needed special assistance, and that she would be back as soon as possible. The colleague looked a bit confused but agreed to handle the desk temporarily. When Maya returned to Linda, she made a decision that surprised herself. Instead of just providing information about standard tours, she offered to personally guide Linda through the public areas of the White House. Linda's face lit up with an expression of pure joy and disbelief. She had expected, at best, to get some basic information and maybe join a regular tour group where she would miss most of the commentary. She never imagined that someone would offer to give her individual attention. Maya led Linda to the beginning of the public tour route, and as they walked, she began to describe not just what they were seeing, but the stories behind everything. Maya had absorbed a lot of information during her months working there, and she found herself sharing details that she had never had the opportunity to talk about with anyone before. She told Linda about the architectural features, the historical significance of different rooms, and some of the interesting facts that regular tour guides often shared with groups. But what made this tour special wasn't just the information Maya was providing. It was the way she was providing it. She took the time to position Linda in the best spots for viewing important features. She described colors, textures, and visual details that would help Linda fully appreciate what she was seeing. When they reached areas with historical paintings, Maya didn't just identify the subjects. She described the artistic style, the facial expressions, and the way the light played across the canvas. Linda was an ideal person to share this experience with. Her questions were thoughtful and showed genuine interest in the history and significance of everything around them. She asked about the daily life of presidents, about how decisions were made in these rooms, and about the ordinary people who had worked in the building over the years. Maya found herself enjoying the conversation in a way that she rarely experienced with other people. There was something about communicating in sign language that felt natural and comfortable to her. Even in this intimidating environment, as they moved through different areas, Maya began to notice that other staff members were watching them. At first, she worried that she was doing something wrong or overstepping her boundaries as an intern. But the expressions on people's faces didn't look disapproving. Instead, they seemed curious and in some cases impressed. A few staff members nodded approvingly as they passed, and Maya began to realize that what she was doing was being seen as positive rather than problematic. What Maya didn't notice was that their tour was being observed by more than just casual staff members. A small security detail had been quietly following them at a distance, not because they were concerned about any threat, but because they had been instructed to keep an eye on the unusual situation. One of the senior staff members had noticed the interaction and had mentioned it to supervisors, who wanted to make sure that the visitor was receiving appropriate attention. Maya also didn't notice that during one portion of their tour, as they stood in an area overlooking the main corridor, someone very important had been watching from an office window. President Biden had been between meetings and had glanced down to see the young intern patiently explaining historical details to an obviously engaged visitor. Something about the scene had caught his attention, and he had paused his conversation with advisors to observe for several minutes. The president had immediately recognized what was happening. He had watched Maya's hands moving in sign language and had seen the visitor's animated responses and expressions of delight. As someone who had spent decades in public service, he understood the importance of accessibility and inclusion, and he was impressed by what he was witnessing. He made a quiet comment to his chief of staff about finding out more information about the intern who was providing such exceptional service. Meanwhile, Maya was completely focused on making sure Linda had the best possible experience. They spent over an hour together, And during that time, Maya felt more confident and purposeful than she had since starting her internship. She wasn't just filing papers or updating databases. She was using her unique skills to make a real difference in someone's day, someone's life even. As their tour neared its end, Linda repeatedly thanked Maya for her kindness and patience. She explained that she had been to other government buildings and historical sites where she had felt overlooked or rushed through experiences. This visit was different. She felt seen, heard, and valued. She told Maya that this had exceeded even her highest expectations for what the visit might be like. Maya exchanged contact information with Linda, promising to stay in touch and help if she ever had questions about other accessible tourism options in Washington. Linda signed that Maya had given her a gift she would never forget, and that she would tell everyone back home about the wonderful young woman who had made her White House dream come true. As Maya watched Linda leave, walking with a spring in her step that hadn't been there when she arrived, Maya felt something she had never experienced in her professional life. She felt proud of her work, proud of her abilities, and proud that she had found the courage to step forward when someone needed help. For the first time since starting her internship, Maya felt like she truly belonged in this important place. She returned to her desk feeling energized rather than drained, unaware that her act of kindness had been observed by the most powerful person in the building, and that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Maya returned to her desk feeling like she was floating on air. The colleague who had covered for her gave her a curious look and mentioned that several people had asked about what she was doing with the visitor. Maya just smiled and said she had helped someone who needed assistance. She didn't elaborate, partly because she didn't want to make a big deal out of it, and partly because she wasn't sure how to explain the amazing feeling she had just experienced. The rest of her shift passed quickly. Maya found herself humming quietly while she organized files and answered routine questions. Every few minutes she would think about Linda's grateful smile and the way her whole face had lit up when Maya first signed to her. It felt incredible to know that she had used her abilities to make such a meaningful difference in someone's day. For years, Maya had felt like her sign language skills were just a personal family matter, something that helped her communicate with David, but wasn't really relevant to the outside world. Today had changed that perspective completely. As 5:30 approached and Maya prepared to leave for the day, Mrs. Patterson appeared at her desk. There was something different about her supervisor's expression, a kind of curious excitement that Maya couldn't quite read. "Maya, I heard you helped a deaf visitor today," Mrs. Patterson said, sitting down in the chair next to Maya's desk. "Several staff members mentioned seeing you giving someone a personal tour." Maya felt her cheeks warm up. She hoped she hadn't gotten in trouble for leaving her assigned post. "Yes, there was a woman who couldn't get help from anyone else. I know sign language, so I was able to communicate with her and show her around a bit. I hope that was okay." Mrs. Patterson's smile was warm and genuine. "More than okay. It was exactly the kind of service we hope to provide to all our visitors. I had no idea you knew sign language. That's quite a skill." Maya shrugged, still feeling a bit embarrassed by the attention. "I learned it because of my brother. It's just something our family does." "Well, it's something special," Mrs. Patterson said. "The visitor you helped, did she seem satisfied with her experience?" "Oh yes," Maya said, her face brightening. She was so happy. She told me this visit was a dream come true for her. She had been trying to arrange accommodations for months before her trip. Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. "That's wonderful to hear. Maya, I want you to know that what you did today represents the very best of what we try to accomplish here. You saw someone who needed help and you used your unique abilities to provide that help. That's exactly the kind of initiative and compassion we value." After Mrs. Patterson walked away, Maya packed up her things and headed home. On the metro ride back to her apartment, she replayed the day's events in her mind. Something had shifted inside her during those hours with Linda. For the first time since starting her internship, Maya felt like she had found a way to contribute something meaningful. She had discovered that her quiet nature and specialized skills could actually be strengths rather than limitations. That evening, Maya called her parents to tell them about her day. When she described helping Linda and giving her a personal tour, her mother started crying with pride. Her father said he had always known that Maya's kindness and abilities would find their purpose someday. Even David, when Maya signed the story to him over video chat, beamed with excitement and told her she was his hero for representing the deaf community so well. Maya went to bed that night feeling more confident about herself and her place in the world than she had in years. She had no idea that while she was settling into sleep, thinking about how she might be able to help other deaf visitors in the future, there was still activity happening at the White House because of her actions. What Maya didn't know was that President Biden had spent part of his evening asking questions about her. After witnessing the tour from his office window, he had been genuinely impressed by what he had seen. During his final meeting of the day, he had mentioned the incident to his chief of staff, describing the young intern who had gone so far above and beyond to help a deaf visitor. The chief of staff had immediately looked into Maya's background. They found her personnel file, learned about her internship program, and discovered that nowhere in her application materials had she mentioned knowing sign language. This made her actions even more remarkable to them. She hadn't helped Linda because it was part of her job description, or because she was trying to get noticed. She had helped because she saw someone who needed assistance and she had the ability to provide it. The president had also asked his team to find out more about Linda Torres, the visitor who had received Maya's help. They discovered her story about planning this trip for 2 years, about her unsuccessful attempts to arrange accessibility services, and about how meaningful this visit was to her personal dreams and goals. This information only reinforced the president's positive impression of Maya's actions. By Wednesday morning, there were several people in the White House who knew Maya's name and what she had done, though Maya herself had no idea about any of this attention. She arrived at work expecting another regular day of administrative tasks. Mrs. Patterson greeted her with the same warm smile as the day before, but didn't mention anything unusual. Maya settled into her routine, feeling more comfortable at her desk than she had in months. Several staff members nodded at her or said good morning in ways that seemed friendlier than usual, but Maya assumed they were just being polite. She had no reason to think that her actions the previous day had sparked conversations among senior White House officials. Around mid-morning, Maya noticed that Mrs. Patterson seemed to be having more phone calls than usual, and that she kept glancing in Maya's direction during these conversations. There also seemed to be more activity in the administrative offices, with people coming and going whom Maya didn't recognize. But Maya was focused on her work and didn't think much of it. What Maya definitely didn't know was that preparations were being made for something that would completely change her life. Phone calls were being made, arrangements were being discussed, and plans were being put into motion that would soon bring her face to face with the most powerful person in the country. Maya spent Wednesday and Thursday working diligently, feeling good about her job, but having no idea that she was about to receive recognition that would exceed her wildest dreams. She continued to think about Linda, and hoped that other deaf visitors would find the resources they needed for meaningful White House experiences. Maya had started to imagine ways she might be able to help create better accessibility services, though she figured these were just personal thoughts that wouldn't lead to anything concrete. Friday morning arrived with Maya feeling optimistic about her future in a way she hadn't experienced in years. She had found her confidence, discovered her purpose, and felt genuinely valuable for the first time in her professional life. She had no idea that this particular Friday would be the day when everything changed forever. Friday started like any other day for Maya. She arrived at work with her usual coffee, settled into her desk, and began organizing the morning paperwork. The past few days had been some of the best of her internship. She felt more confident, more purposeful, and more like she actually belonged in this important place. The memory of helping Linda Torres continued to fill her with pride and had given her ideas about how she might contribute more meaningfully to making the White House accessible for all visitors. Around 10:30, Mrs. Patterson approached her desk with an expression that Maya couldn't quite read. There was excitement there, but also something that looked almost like nervousness. "Maya, I need you to come with me to a meeting," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice carrying a strange formality that Maya had never heard before. Maya looked at her computer screen, where she had been updating visitor databases. "Should I finish this first? I'm almost done with the morning reports." "No, leave that for now. This meeting is important, and we need to go right away." Mrs. Patterson was already gathering her things and clearly expected Maya to follow immediately. As they walked through corridors that Maya had never seen before, deeper into the White House than she had ever been, Maya began to feel nervous. The hallways were more elegant here, with thicker carpets and more elaborate decorations. Important-looking people in expensive suits were walking purposefully in different directions, and Maya began to worry that she was underdressed or unprepared for whatever meeting she was about to attend. "Mrs. Patterson, what kind of meeting is this? Did I do something wrong?" Maya asked, trying to keep up with her supervisor's unusually quick pace. "You didn't do anything wrong, Maya. In fact, you did something very right." Mrs. Patterson's smile was mysterious, and Maya felt even more confused. They stopped outside a set of impressive wooden doors that Maya recognized from photographs and television coverage. These were doors she had only seen in pictures, doors that led to rooms where the most important decisions in the country were made. Maya's heart began to race as she realized they weren't going to a routine staff meeting in some conference room. They were going somewhere much more significant. "Mrs. Patterson, I think there's been some mistake. I'm just an intern. I shouldn't be in this part of the building. Trust me, Maya, you're exactly where you're supposed to be." The doors opened, and Maya stepped into a room that took her breath away. The elegant furniture, the historical paintings, the sense of importance that seemed to hang in the air like perfume. But what shocked her even more than the room itself were the people in it. There, sitting in one of the chairs with the biggest smile Maya had ever seen, was Linda Torres. She was wearing a beautiful dress and looked like she was glowing with excitement. When she saw Maya, she immediately stood up and began signing enthusiastically. "Maya, I can't believe this is happening. They called me yesterday and asked if I could come back to Washington for a special event. I had no idea what it was about, but now I understand." Maya was so shocked to see Linda that it took her a moment to notice the other people in the room. Senior staff members she recognized from news coverage, people who worked directly with the president, individuals whose names she knew from television and newspapers. And then, as if the whole scene couldn't get any more surreal, President Biden himself entered the room. Maya felt like her knees might give out. She had seen the president from a distance during official events, but she had never imagined being in the same room with him, let alone being the focus of his attention. President Biden walked directly toward her with a warm smile and extended his hand. "Maya, it's such a pleasure to meet you. I've been looking forward to this conversation since Tuesday afternoon." Maya shook his hand, barely able to find her voice. "Mr. President, I'm not sure why I'm here. I think there might be some confusion." "No confusion at all. I want to talk to you about something I witnessed earlier this week, something that impressed me tremendously." The president gestured toward the chairs and everyone sat down. Maya felt like she was in a dream. President Biden leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "On Tuesday afternoon, I happened to be looking out the window of my office when I saw you helping a visitor who was having trouble communicating with our staff. I watched you spend over an hour giving her a personal tour, taking extra time to make sure she felt welcomed and included." Maya glanced at Linda, who was practically bouncing in her chair with excitement. "I just did what anyone would do. She needed help and I was able to help her." "But that's exactly the point, Maya. Not everyone would have done what you did. Most people would have found someone else to handle the situation, or provided minimal assistance and moved on. You went above and beyond because you saw someone who needed help, and you had the ability to provide that help." The president continued. "Linda has told us about her experience here, about how this visit exceeded her expectations in every possible way. She said you made her feel seen and valued in a way that she rarely experiences at public institutions." Linda started signing to Maya, her hands moving with emotion. "You gave me the most wonderful day I've had in years. You treated me like I mattered, like my questions were important, like I deserved to have the same amazing experience as any other visitor." President Biden had been watching Linda's signs, and Maya was surprised when he signed back a simple thank you to her. His signing was basic but genuine, and Linda's face lit up even more. "I've been thinking about your actions for several days, Maya," the president continued, "and I've been discussing with my team how we can do better when it comes to accessibility and inclusion for all our visitors. Your example showed us what's possible when someone with the right skills and the right heart is in the right position to help." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She had never imagined that her simple act of kindness would be noticed by anyone important, let alone by the president himself. "Maya, I'd like to offer you a position as the White House's first director of visitor accessibility. It would be a full-time role focused on ensuring that visitors with all types of disabilities have the same meaningful experiences here that Linda had with you." You would help us develop new programs, train staff, and serve as a liaison with disability communities across the country. Maya felt like the world had stopped spinning. She looked at Linda, who was crying happy tears and signing congratulations. She looked at Mrs. Patterson, who was beaming with pride. She looked at the president, who was waiting patiently for her response. I don't know what to say. A few days ago, I was just filing papers and trying not to be noticed. I never imagined anything like this. Sometimes the most extraordinary opportunities come from the most ordinary acts of human kindness, President Biden said. You saw someone who needed help and you helped her. That's the kind of person we need in positions of leadership and service. Maya thought about her brother David, about all the times she had wished the world was more accessible and welcoming for people like him. She thought about Linda and how happy she had looked during their tour together. She thought about all the other deaf visitors who might come to the White House in the future, and how she could help make their experiences special too. Yes, Maya said, her voice stronger than it had ever been. Yes, I would be honored to accept this position. The room erupted in smiles and congratulations. Linda jumped up and hugged Maya, signing that she was so proud and excited. Mrs. Patterson wiped away tears of her own, telling Maya that she had always known she was destined for something special. As Maya left the White House that evening, no longer as a shy intern but as the newly appointed Director of Visitor Accessibility, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just 1 week. She had learned that sometimes the best way to stop being invisible is to focus on making sure others are seen, and sometimes the smallest acts of courage can lead to the most incredible opportunities. Maya couldn't wait to call David and tell him that his big sister had found a way to make the world a little more accessible, one visitor at a time.